Hello, I'm Thomas Sturm, a philosopher at ICREA, that is the Catalan Institute for Research and Advanced Studies, and at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. My own research focuses on foundational and applied issues concerning rationality in the sciences, in politics, in education, and more. And related to that, I also think about science policy issues, such as the EU's fifth freedom. Now, from the documents in which this concept appears, we only learn fragments about this goal. So I reflected on the concept and its uses, on necessary policy changes, and that's all now published in a European review paper. The concept of a fifth freedom was prepared by the second Commissioner for Research, Ralph Dahrendorf, in the 1970s, and Commission President Jacques Delors in the late 1980s. Delors spoke of a freedom of exchanging ideas and experience, and this became, through Commissioner Janez Potočnik's statements from the 2000s, the freedom of knowledge, a core element of the new European research area, ICREA. Now, last year's report on the single market by former Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta states that the fifth freedom should be developed further for strengthening that market. That is right, and that is one legitimate goal. But my perspective is also broader and deeper. In my view, the fifth freedom goal gives us a more comprehensive vision for science and its social functions in a European society. Let me explain. To begin, what could the fifth freedom mean? I think that three main points are central. First, the fifth freedom is meant in analogy to the four freedoms of the single market, the free mobility of persons, goods, services, and capital across national borders. The freedom of knowledge is a special freedom, however, required by what the scientific system needs for itself and for better serving European society. Secondly, the freedom of knowledge helps to promote open access to data and knowledge. That's how many people understand it, and that concerns the output of science. But we also need freedom for the process of generating that output. The fifth freedom's central goal is to enhance the free mobility of researchers. If you are a student or a researcher from one EU country moving to another, for instance, you often face more bureaucracy than the citizens of that country. That's discriminatory. Researchers should not perceive national borders inside the EU. EU member states must abolish unnecessary and discriminatory national rules and habits. Thirdly, research funding must flow more freely as well. The European Commission has already demanded that money follows researchers and allows it in its ERC projects. EU countries should likewise allow their research funding organizations to permit the mobility of individual grants with researchers who move from one EU country to another. Also, if one successfully applies for instance, a German DFG fund from Poland or Portugal, it should be possible to carry out that project in Poland or Portugal. Now, this affects national financial interests, I know that. And one might claim that the mobility of such national funding is wholly unrealistic. That is actually a very complex issue, but let me make one point here. We have extended worker mobility stepwise when the European Union became larger. We can experiment in a similar way, stepwise, with letting national funding move across borders inside the European Union and see what harm and what good it does. By the way, 6 national funding organizations have already opened up for some such mobility. So it is not unrealistic to test for more freedom here. And that, in sum, is what the fifth freedom should be. A freedom from national borders in the mobility of scientists, their expertise, and also to a good extent the material means of their research. If realized, that would help to build a more perfect European research area. Now you may ask, should we really grant this freedom? And in my view, yes, absolutely. Here are 4 main and interrelated reasons. Reason number 1, the fifth freedom helps to advance science. Much scientific knowledge requires know-how of procedures and methods. This knowledge cannot be expressed completely by abstract rules. It must be shown to colleagues, and it must be passed on from one generation to another through direct and joint learning. Moreover, research is a cooperative activity. In particle accelerators, climate research, or large editorial projects in the humanities, people must be brought together to overcome blind spots and to improve their standards and methods. Now again, consider an analogy. The positive economic effects of abolishing national tariffs and other barriers through the freedoms of the single market are already widely known, and Brexit has proved that they are effective. In a similar way, reducing and removing national barriers in the EU should increase scientific productivity just as well. In that sense, science can advance better through the fifth freedom. Second reason, the fifth freedom supports the classical freedom of research. The classical freedom of research means that science should remain free from undue external influences, for instance, from political or other special interests that try to bend the processes and results of research in their favor. We see this freedom of research being threatened today, even in the United States. The EU should move in exactly the opposite direction. And free mobility of researchers, their expertise, and also the means of researchers can boost the quality and impact of scientific evidence and arguments. Thus, the fifth freedom can boost the classical freedom of research. Third reason, science, as we know, plays a crucial role in numerous societal innovations and developments. As pointed out already by the Delors Commission, we live in what may be called a knowledge society. And as the latter report has stated, by advancing the fifth freedom, we advance the power of science to spearhead innovation in technology, the economy, and human well-being. Not only science itself benefits from the fifth freedom, but European societies do so too. Reason number 4. The fifth freedom supports democracy and democratic ideals. Science is one of the best inventions of human culture and history. It creates ever better, less biased and less parochial knowledge of nature and humankind. And that's exactly what open democratic societies need. To decide on important political projects, science is needed to strengthen and train the public use of reason, to quote the philosopher Immanuel Kant. And our reasoning powers are in turn needed to protect citizens against today's increasing and anti-scientific propaganda, populism, and polarization. Thus, strengthening science through the fifth freedom can fortify European democracies. In sum, the fifth freedom promotes the progress of science, the classical freedom of research, innovations for our societies, and our democratic ideals. And these points are intimately connected. For instance, a faster progressing science boosts societal innovations, but it also boosts our democracy. A stronger democracy, in turn, protects the freedom of research. Thus, the fifth freedom is key for these connections to emerge and strengthen. The freedom of knowledge, while distinct from the other 4 freedoms of the single market, is as important as them, and it should therefore also become a right of scientists to be free from discriminatory and obsolete national rules and practices and habits inside the European Union member states. All of this can deepen and strengthen the European Union. And that's my broader and deeper perspective on the fifth freedom. You find more about this in my European review paper concerning why the European research area will profit from the fifth freedom in the present, very challenging international scenes, what discriminatory and unnecessary national rules still exist, and what agents at national and European levels should act now. I plan a web page to collect further information and also to engage scientists in the Fifth Freedom Project. Thank you very much for your attention.